There is a moment that quietly changes how you see relationships forever. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with fireworks or certainty. It comes as a subtle internal shift. You notice that something feels different. The conversations that once pulled you in now feel heavy. The emotional highs you once chased feel loud. The urge to be needed no longer feels flattering. At first, you think something is wrong. You wonder if you are becoming cold, detached, too independent. But what is actually happening is simpler and more unsettling. You are becoming whole. And when that happens, relationships stop looking like solutions and start looking like reflections. Most people enter relationships from a place of lack. Not consciously. Not because they are broken, but because they have learned to live fragmented. A part of them is anxious. A part of them wants reassurance. A part of them is waiting to be chosen. So relationships feel necessary. They regulate emotions. They stabilize identity. They offer proof of worth. When you are not whole, love feels like relief. But when wholeness begins to form, something changes. You stop asking, will this make me feel secure? You start asking, is this true? That single shift changes everything. Because now relationships are no longer needed to complete you. They are invited to walk beside you. And that distinction is massive. Alan Watts often spoke about the illusion of incompleteness. The idea that we are fragments searching for missing pieces. But wholeness is not something you achieve by finding the right person. It is something that happens when you stop abandoning yourself. And once that happens, you cannot unsee the difference. When you are fragmented, relationships carry weight they were never meant to hold. They become emotional regulators, identity stabilizers, proof of value. You may not say it out loud, but part of you is hoping the relationship will fix something. The loneliness, the uncertainty, the self-doubt. So you cling. You overgive. You tolerate confusion longer than you should. Not because you lack standards, but because losing the relationship feels like losing stability. This is where love quietly turns into a transaction. You give emotional labor. They give reassurance. You suppress your needs. They stay. You abandon your truth. You remain chosen. Jung described this as projection. You place unintegrated parts of yourself onto another person and call it intimacy. But intimacy built on unmet needs is fragile. Because the moment the relationship wobbles, so does your sense of self. And deep down, your body knows this. That is why fragmented relationships feel anxious, intense, and exhausting. They are not rooted in presence. They are rooted in survival. Wholeness is not emotional detachment. It is not self-sufficiency taken to an extreme. It is not the absence of desire. Wholeness is emotional self-containment. It means you can feel without outsourcing regulation. You can be alone without collapsing. You can want without needing. This happens when you stop suppressing parts of yourself and start integrating them. The anger you avoided. The grief you postponed. The fear you distracted yourself from. Instead of pushing them away, you let them exist. And something strange happens. The desperation softens. You still want connection. But you no longer need it to survive emotionally. Alan Watts described this as dropping the act. You stop performing stability. You actually become stable. And once that happens, relationships no longer feel like lifelines. They feel optional. That does not make you less loving. It makes you more honest. This is where many people feel confused. The people who once felt magnetic now feel chaotic. The intensity that once felt exciting now feels dysregulating. You start noticing different things. Presence instead of charm. consistency instead of mystery, clarity instead of emotional spikes. At first, this can feel boring. Not because it is boring, but because your nervous system is learning safety instead of stimulation. When you were fragmented, chemistry often came from unresolved tension, push and pull, uncertainty, emotional unpredictability. When you are whole, attraction shifts toward resonance. There is less adrenaline, more depth. You stop being pulled toward people who activate wounds, and start noticing people who feel steady. This is not settling. It is maturing. You are no longer attracted to how someone makes you feel about yourself. You are attracted to who they actually are. And that changes everything. When you are fragmented, boundaries feel aggressive. You enforce them out of fear. You explain them out of guilt. You defend them out of resentment. But when you are whole, boundaries become natural. You do not negotiate your energy. You do not over-explain your limits. You do not feel responsible for managing someone else's reactions. You simply live from clarity. You say no without justification. You step back without drama. You leave when something feels misaligned. Not because you are cold, but because you are no longer negotiating yourself. Alan Watts spoke about non-resistance. Not forcing. Not defending. Just being. When you are whole, boundaries are not walls. They are expressions of self-respect. This is one of the biggest shifts. When you are whole, relationships stop being survival tools and start becoming mirrors. Conflict no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like information. Discomfort no longer feels threatening. It feels revealing. You stop blaming others for how you feel, because you are no longer outsourcing responsibility for your inner state. This does not mean you tolerate harm. It means you see clearly. You can be close without losing yourself. You can love without clinging. You can engage without dissolving. Love becomes spacious. Not consuming. Not urgent. Not desperate. Jung believed that conscious relationships are possible only between whole individuals. Not perfect ones. Whole ones. And when you stop needing someone, you finally see them clearly. This is the part no one prepares you for. When you become whole, some relationships cannot come with you. Not because they were bad. Not because anyone failed. But because they were built on need. Dynamics based on imbalance collapse. When one person no longer plays their role, you may feel guilt. You may feel grief. You may wonder if you are abandoning people. But often, what is actually happening is that you are no longer abandoning yourself. Some connections only exist because you were fragmented. When the fragmentation heals, the structure dissolves. This loss can feel lonely, but it is temporary, because what you gain is clarity. And clarity always precedes alignment. Being whole does not make you superior. It makes you quiet, less reactive, less performative, less hungry. You stop chasing connection and start recognizing it. You stop auditioning for love and start meeting it. This path is not for everyone. Some people need relationships to grow. Others need solitude. Neither is better. But if you are feeling this shift, if relationships feel different now, if intensity feels heavy instead of exciting, you are not broken. You are becoming whole. And when that happens, love stops being something you chase and becomes something you recognize. Quietly. Clearly. Without hunger.